Welcome. This is a session on Freemium. So if you haven't come to the Freemium session, you're in the wrong place. But you're very welcome. I'm Toby Green. I'm head of publishing at OECD, we have here a panel with Joe Esposito, Bill Park from Deep Dive, and Jean-Christophe from Open Editions, all the way from Marseille in France, to come and talk to you about perhaps a new business model, an alternative to toll access or open access publishing. I thought I'd just set the scene a little. It's a bit of a personal view about what I think has been going on in the industry, and in particular all the discussion about open access publishing, which has been upsetting me because it seems to be like a black and white thing, and I'm not sure that in fact it is black and white at all. And I have serious doubts about the money will be there to fund author-pays publishing right across the board. And I think there's a place for looking at freemium. So the first question is, what about our audience? And of course we have our traditional audience, which is the authors, the researchers, and the students. And I know a lot of scholarly publishers stop there, thinking, well, that is the audience. I reckon there's a bigger audience out there, and in fact, this is a quote from one of our editors. The audience that finds our content interesting is always larger than the audience you think. And if you think about it, we probably all know who Madonna is, and I bet she doesn't know who any of us are. I think that there is a large audience out there of practitioners, unaffiliated researchers, and now, of course, the educated layman, bearing in mind that in a lot of countries, more than half of the population are university educated. And therefore, they are able to read scholarly materials, and they are interested in scholarly materials, but they're not at an institution that subscribes, and therefore they have no access. And that maybe is something. And this slide proves that. This is OECD data showing the number of same slides I showed this morning, and there's a line showing where you have 50% of the population going to university, and you can see that many more countries now are sending more than half of their kids to university, and that trend is growing, which means that there will be more readers for our stuff in the future. It was about 14 countries in 2000, and it's 25 countries in 2010, so it's really growing quite fast. So they're the fish. And of course, all these graduates are growing up in what's called a knowledge economy. All the politicians talk about a knowledge economy. But you have to subscribe to knowledge, always. And that's where I think the drive is coming from, is why the policymakers are so interested in open access, is because there is this large population of people who are not at subscribing institutions who need access to content, and that's driving this demand for content to be open access. But the question is, how are we going to pay for it? So there's also the shock. I know, in the world I come from, I meet a lot of the policymakers, and I get emails a lot from policymakers who, when confronted with having to pay for an OECD report, are horrified that they have to pay. They say, but we already paid for it. And I have to remind them that they paid for the research. They didn't pay to publish it. And they don't understand the difference. They think that actually publishing costs nothing, because it's just a PDF file you shove it on the website, it's done. And in some ways they're probably right, but they forget all the value that we add. But it's a futile discussion. You can't really have an argument with these people about it. They just demand the content to be free, and they're not prepared to have conversations. I had a conversation recently with the Swedish foreign minister, who was really outraged at the idea that the OECD sells its content at all. And when I asked him, well, would he then argue to increase our funding by 13 million euros, he just laughed. And I said, well, that's what it costs to publish, and what do you want? So this is an interesting issue. Publishers, of course, are reacting to this. A lot of them are turning their companies 360 degrees. And of course, this means that they're looking at authors, which means that they're only looking at the tiny fish at the front, and they're ignoring, and I think there's a real risk that they're ignoring the needs of readers. And I think there is a risk with open access publishing, because if the publishers turn and flip and just face the author, who's going to be listening to the needs of the reader? Because if there's no money there, then the publishers have no incentive to develop services for readers. And I think that's a risk for open access publishing. And certainly as you see the price of author pays, and you can easily see a competition, price competition for author pays publishing, it means that the publishers are going to have less and less money to invest in reader-facing services. So what are the readers going to do? There are two scenarios. One is the readers just suffer, or of course you have another scenario where you're going to get publishers harvesting the free content and wrapping reader services around it and selling it, which means suddenly you've got two markets. You've got an author-facing market and a reader-facing market, which I think would be unfortunate. That's why I think we need a little balance in the system. We need to think about all the stakeholders in the knowledge economy. There's the authors, the funders, the taxpayers, the readers, the publishers, the policymakers, the librarians, and that's why I think there's scope for freemium. So I've got a panel here of experts who all believe, as I do, that there is scope for freemium in the market, and maybe in fact freemium will be a solution to the tension between the needs to try and balance between the author and the reader. So I hope we have a good session. I'm now going to hand over